my first year in Madison was 1998. And so in 1999, in the summer, I was here just to kind of do stuff in my office. And I realized the building was on with air conditioning going, lights were all on, and no one was here. So this is like June, July. And so I thought, what could we do? We should be doing so. There should be something going on, because Music Clinic happens around the 4th of July, and then it's done. And then in July, at that time, Madison was very different. It was a lot smaller, and the summer was very kind of sleepy. And so, and I was just thinking, knowing what I already knew about Madison, is that there's so many intellectual people here, so many well-educated people, that an early music festival or something like that, some kind of a summer thing where they could come and concentrate, maybe participate, would really work here. You know, it seemed like the perfect place for it. And with all the restaurants here, with the dorms here, so we could really host a festival. And so I started talking to my friends about the trumpet professor at the time, John Ailey, had been a longtime friend of mine. And so I was asking him, and he said, well, you should talk to Chelcy Bowles, who was in, at that time, she's a harpist, who was in the continuing education division. And her job was to run summer workshops, and also to do travel. She took people around the world. And so she was interested. There were some programs that were sort of being phased out. And she'd already played some early music. She'd been involved in Irish music and other kinds of folk music kind of things too. So we just thought, okay, we're going to try it. And so summer of 1999, we put on, and that time it was 2 weeks. So, and we had the same faculty, but all different participants, which we didn't realize how tiring that was going to be on everybody. There were so many, it was really like, well, let's just see what's going to happen. And we had about 60 people, I think, show up for each week. So that was pretty good. And we did Heinrich Schütz and Monteverdi. And so that drew a certain crowd of people, you know. And then we every year we kind of tried different things. It was my idea to always have a theme, whether it was a time period or a historic event or a composer. Most often it ended up being a composer. And that seemed to work really well. So people knew what they were getting into, and it gave us a lot of music to work with too, a lot of variety of music. And I forgot to mention that my wife, Cheryl Bensman-Rowe, I remember I went home after meeting with Chelcy for the first time. I said, well, we're going to try to do a music festival. And she was like, what? You know, because I think it was just out of the blue. I hadn't really talked about it very much because I didn't even know if it was possible. But then she was in on it from the beginning, because we'd both been members of the Waverly Consort, which was one of the premier early music groups of like the 1960s. And by the time we were in it, she was in it in the late 70s and I was in it in the 80s. It was really, it was kind of old school. There were already new people, players like you, who had grown up already playing original instruments. All the original members of Waverly had started on other instruments because you couldn't get a lute and you couldn't get recorders of different pitches and types. And it just wasn't available. And so they sort of saw that, along with the Noah Greenberg Pro Musica, there were a few other groups like that were around. Folger Consort started around that time. And so it was fun to be a part of that. And we were like the second generation coming in where there was more expectation of, oh, we're just going to do performance practice, no problem. You know. So that was a really interesting time. And so that gave us sort of the background. Plus we knew all the people who were active at the time, because we'd been in New York, Philadelphia, Washington, all kind of Chicago. We'd done a little bit with Newberry already, and Newberry was a logical one to connect with early, and they were heavily involved. David Douglas and Ellen Hargis were really involved almost from the beginning. So that was kind of the start of it. And then the next year we did 1 week.
You were like, it's
right,
too much.
Yeah. We also started incorporating, the first year we only had one lecturer, and he lectured before every concert. Wow. And we nearly killed him, I think. So there was Blake Wilson, who's actually a really great scholar, particularly of Laude. That's his specialty. But he was game for it, so he did it. But then we started getting lecturers from school, finding out people who are interested in the subject, maybe not in music, but in some aspect of the society, things like that. So we were really supported by this community of educators and, people who are always looking to learn new things.
Wow.
So it turned out to be a great place to start this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how was your experience throughout those 20 years that you've been leading MEMF?
Well, that was 27 years ago, which is hard to believe.
Wow.
Right. And we had, for about 15 years, we were just tweaking, and we ended up with a following of people from all over the country that would sort of plan around our week. And we're still in touch with a bunch of them. It's ended up spawning things like the Just Bach concert series, and the Handel Aria competition came out of the Early Music Festival. And so those things were sort of, I think people saw that there was an audience for this kind of music. And so that really worked to our advantage too.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and then I think the big thing was Chelcy got ready to retire, I think in year 17 or 18. Mm-hmm. And then we started thinking, okay, well, we're going to retire at some point, so we need to start looking on how we're going to pass this on. Mm-hmm. And then COVID hit. Mm. And that really, with a festival like ours where you brought 30 or 40 faculty members and 115 or so people from all over the country, was totally out of the question. And a lot of our people were older, I would say, although as we kept going, we got more and more young people. And I think that's a trend that's happened with the early music scene too, right. That there are a lot of young people. And some people were even, I don't know if you know Brandon Aker, mm-hmm. The lutenist. Well, mm-hmm. He'd never played the lute. He was a classical guitarist. And he grew up here in Middleton. And he came one year, worked with Grant Herod, and all of a sudden he's playing the lute. And now he's worked at Xavi Diaz-Latore, who we talked about earlier, and he's playing all over the world. I just saw he's going for his first concert in Paris. Wow. As with his theorbo. So, it was one of those things. He went from a regular teenager kind of playing guitar, and now all of a sudden he's one of the real early music lute players around.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think, and that's part of the legacy too of even Priscilla Herod, mm-hmm. who's running Pifaro. Mm-hmm. She came here when she was 18, I think, or 19, and was just around everything. And she'd played Baroque oboe, but not very much, I don't think. And so she got to know the Pifaro folks and all that. There are a lot of people around the country now who got their start or continued their career through the Madison Early Music Festival.
Well, and I was one of them.
Right, that's
exactly
right.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
I actually found that
was
program.
10 years ago, really?
2016.
Wow. Okay. Hard to believe.
Yeah, what a wonderful coincidence. 10 years later, here I am. If someone could have told me 10 years ago that I will come back in a different role,
right.
I would have never believed.
Right. With as spread out as you are, you're exactly. All over the place. Yeah.
Exactly. Between Europe, East Africa, United
right.
States.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I think MEMF inspired me and was actually left a very big impact on my artistry.
Oh.
Yes. I do think that it showed me the depth of expression and the freedom of historical performance. And the little I knew, next year I went to Juilliard for historical performance masters.
Right, because the 415 program had started, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, Bob Mealy was actually here. He was the first director of that program. And he was here doing a concert the year it started. He got a call and they said, we've got funding. What do you want to do this and this and this? And so he was involved in the planning of the 415 program from here.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
The circle is closing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what is your vision as, of course, you left the legacy, and what is your wish? How would you love to see it continuing growing?
Well, I think growth is a funny thing, right? Things change, like we went from 2 weeks to 1 week, mm-hmm. and and consolidated things, and every year we tried to do that. And I think in a way, the fact that you're going to take this over now, which we haven't talked about yet, but it is a way for it to find a different identity based on the history of it, mm-hmm. but maybe in a different way. I always thought from the beginning, from the first few years especially, that it might be better to have it be a concert series with a series of lectures or something to streamline it a little more. Or maybe have the workshop be separate. There were all kinds of theories about the way it would work. And it seems to me that what your plans are for this is to make it a more concentrated experience. Maybe not so much for the amateur, the person who doesn't know what a recorder is, which is what initially that's who we had. We had a lot of people like, this is a recorder, it came in families. You have to explain all the stuff. But that sort of dropped away. We didn't have to do that after a while because the world was getting used to it too. And I think your idea of having a resident group and having some faculty, some lectures, and a smaller workshop really makes sense in today's environment.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe more than the 150 people, gathering to look at it.
Right. Yeah, so I envision it as a little seed that we get to put into the soil and take a lot of care, sun, warmth, and water.
Right.
Which is our audiences, our supporters, and to take this legacy and the tradition and bring a little innovation and maybe rethinking what is an early music festival today.
Right.
What does it mean for today's audiences and for our student body? Because being part of a university, I feel like it's such a honor for us to have the next generation watch us and also see a kind of experiment, maybe, use them as a guinea pig.
Right, sure. Right. Well, that was, when we first started, we didn't really know how it would work to have this faculty of very accomplished musicians to play with these amateurs. Right. I felt like that was an important thing, that we needed a time every day when everybody got together. Yeah. And so we created this idea of the All Festival. It's a little unwieldy for this music, which is meant to be played one on a part or maybe three at the most, right? To have 150 people doing it. But it also did create this sort of sense of we're sharing the information. This is beautiful music. Even if we're not doing it exactly appropriately, we're still getting familiar with it.
Yeah.
And living with it and sharing it as people.
What I really appreciate about MEMF that you've built is the community. It always had a sense of shared community.
Right.
Everyone was welcome. And that's something that I really am very passionate about and want to always keep alive, because I feel like early music is a place where everyone has a place to be. Whether you're a beginner, whether you're a specialist, we're all lifelong learners. And I really hope that everyone can feel how they are part of this community, whether they're beginners or they're advanced, or maybe they're professors of a different university, yet they can come and learn something for themselves.
Yeah, we definitely found that to be true, that there were a lot of people who maybe had never concentrated on early music that wanted to come for a week and just see. Or maybe it was a certain composer they didn't know much about, and so they wanted to come. So we had visiting people who were very accomplished musicians or scholars, but just weren't familiar with this particular literature.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it was a great way to get that going.
Great.
Yeah.
And for the 2026, the undertitle is Uniting the Arts. So what I really am excited about is that we get physics department, dance department, jazz and museum, music, and not only Baroque music, but also electronic music.
Right.
So we kind of remarry and reunite those forms of arts that used to be all one back in the Baroque times. And of course, a good part of our civilization that we got specialists, so we get better in our little field. But the sad part is that we lost the overview. That is so important, right?
Right.
And so as I was studying the history of MEMF, I've seen so many fascinating topics. So maybe you can share some of those collaborations that you really feel like stand out to you.
Sure. Well, one of the fun ones, since you talked about science, was we decided to do a thing about the invention of the telescope. Was it 1511? Is that right? So I think it was 2011.
Wow.
We decided to do this whole thing, and so we got the astronomy department at UW, professors to come over. They lectured about the history of the telescope and how it was built. They had an old one, this brass thing, And then we went to the observatory. We would look through the big telescope there. And we went out to Spring Green and did a whole viewing with lots of little telescopes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those years where it just seemed, there was so much music, obviously, 1511 in Italy, come on. Well, and so it just opened up all this other stuff, all these connections. And Galileo's father was a composer, and Galileo was interested, so he was thinking about pitches and tuning systems and all
planets,
that. Right,
course,
yeah.
yes.
And so there we were. It was the music of the spheres was what we called
Exactly.
it.
Yes, I remember. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so often there were connections like the Spanish thing that we were talking about, where you know about it. You know about the diaspora, you know about certain things. But when you get to spend a week thinking about the politics and how many Muslims there were, and how many Jews there were, and how many Catholics there were, and the Inquisition, and, there was all that stuff. So, and it all pulls together because the music gives you a sense of what it might have sounded like at the time.
Right.
So you can see artwork, you can see things about what it looked like, but it actually gives you a sense of how people were dealing with their environment, creating art, and the time of it.
Right.
Sometimes these longer pieces, these slow, worked out canons and stuff like that we just don't hear very much really anymore. But it really gave you a sense of what that time period was like.
So basically, MEMF has been a time machine.
Right. It always felt like that. And for a whole week, we would be in Lübeck, or we would be in Leipzig, or we would, whatever. We tended to be, just because of the nature of the Renaissance and that whole, however you view the term Renaissance, so much of it was happening in Italy. Italy really was the musical center. And so as long as we were pre-1700, it kind of went to Italy. We did do Lully and Rameau at one point, which covers kind of a long historical range. But it was interesting then the first year I remember we explored the connection between England and Italy, which people aren't really aware of too much. We think about England and Germany kind of having exchange because they're so close together. Mm-hmm. But there were so many Italian composers that were brought in. So we talked about Striggio and, the effect they had on Tallis and, that whole thing. And that, I think, was new to a lot of people.
Wow.
The Musica Transalpina, that whole thing. Yeah. And it was just when we had students, we often had 8 to 10 students. Not always UW students, but students from other colleges. And often that was the first time they've been exposed to that. Even the term Musica Transalpina.
Wow.
Which seems surprising if you've lived in that time period, right? But that was the idea. So we were in 1490 to 1500, or 1590 to 1600, wherever we happen to be.
And also, what a privilege for us to start those students from scratch. Every time when I have a Baroque flute student who has never seen a Baroque flute before, I think, what a privilege. I get to tell him how wonderful this instrument is.
Yeah. And show him all the music.
Exactly.
That actually works better for that instrument than for a modern flute.
And then the most fun part is when the student goes like, oh, it does work better on this flute. Right. And it's like, yes.
Now, that was actually one of my big revelations. The first time I got to do a St. John Passion of Bach with original instruments, because I'd done it with modern instruments several times. Got hired to, I forget who it was with, but and the music was so much more clear. And tempo seemed to be, it was easier to find out what tempo should be. Everything just made sense because the instruments were not kind of powering through it,
Exactly.
And it was true of the strings and the winds and everybody.
Right.
And it was just like eye-opening, when you've heard it mostly on either on modern instruments or sort of modern instruments, because I'd heard harpsichord before, obviously, a lot, but this was just a whole, it's like, we have to do this.
Right.
It's not meant to be a 200-person choir and 100-person orchestra. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, even the length of the bow and the construction of it. That already gives us so much information about phrasing. Every note.
Yeah, and how things are shaped, how the melodies are shaped. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and once you take that step, I feel like you can never go back.
Right.
You're
Well, it just
there.
misses something. I mean, you really get an insight into why this guy was promoted as a genius, starting in 1800 or whatever. Because the music is fantastic and it still survives. It works on piano, it works on other instruments. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
And that's why I think early music festivals, which give you a chance to sample it, and people that maybe don't in their hometown have an early music ensemble, because how many towns do, you get to hear that,
Exactly.
so you know what it can sound like.
And then you can go back to your hometown and make a new ensemble.
Right, sort of recorder ensemble
Yes.
or whatever, which is what ends up happening actually often.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So those little seeds that you basically give to every member, they go and care for that. And
Right.
then the whole world turns into a magical garden.
That's what we hope. Yeah.
Right. That's what this world needs too.
Right. And I think especially now, as we were talking about technology earlier, and the fact that this puts you in a time frame that you really can't do this music except in the time it's supposed to happen. You can't jump in and out. You can't cut it very much. You can make edits maybe, but generally you want to just do what we have, to the best of your knowledge. And that puts you in the time.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Away from the storm and stress of every day,
Exactly. To storm and the stress of maybe Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, but not storm
Right,
the
yeah.
stress of today.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I had to mention it, as you said.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's yeah, we even another thing I just thought was fun to mention, because I always thought, okay, we're going to use 1800 as a cutoff. Everybody always says, what's early music? Well,
Right.
how do you define that simply? So I just decided, okay, we're going to do 1800 and we'll call it. But then we started looking at, we were going to get a forte piano here. We were working on a project, which we ended up getting a forte piano. And so we decided, well, let's move a little later. And there was a group that already had a sort of 1840s program. So we had 1 year where we actually used a Steinway piano that was built in 1876 that Farley's House of Piano had just restored.
Oh, wow.
And did some Stephen Foster and shape note singing, and we talked about that in America, which we didn't really do a lot with America because it wasn't 1600. There wasn't a whole lot of music here. We did do some stuff with South America and with Mexico, but not so much the U.S. And that was our big U.S. kind of venture. But we had to move a little later when we were a little more established.
Amazing. So basically, in the history of MEMF, you've been traveling through centuries.
Right. And
Yeah.
we spent a couple of years, we did 13th and 14th century, which was a stretch for our normal, because most people, I think of Baroque music. You think of Handel and Bach, and, that's kind of the go-to for early music. But it's also fun to explore Machot and, the sort of earlier things that really sound different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So those years were very fun to have concerts of all kinds, just Dunstable, and that sort of what seems like the very dim past of music history.
Exactly.
But then it turns out they're always specialists. So we always brought people in who spend their whole life in the 14th century.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And what was your favorite moment so many years and so many wonderful experiences, I'm sure.
I actually think this is a funny thing. Now, if I can think of the name of the Monteverdi piece, it's from the because we did it we used to have a faculty concert. I ended up dropping that because the week got too busy. But we did this long Monteverdi Beatus View. So right, and everybody. All the faculty was in on it. And it was one of those things that during the concert, with few rehearsals, luckily we had professional people, so we didn't need that many rehearsals. But there was still a lot, even the day before. Are you going to do this part, or are you going to do that part? And so there was this excitement about, are we actually going to get all the notes in there, if somebody doesn't forget or whatever. And in the performance, we got to one point where the thing just sort of took off. And you don't experience that much. Even for all the performances I've done, you occasionally hit a moment where all of a sudden you're really taken out of the world and the music just sort of takes over. And that piece in particular, with its repeated sections and all that, by the kind of final third, it was just flying. And I never remember an audience at the Early Music Festival just exploding, because it was the last thing on the program anyway. But I'll never forget that feeling.
Wow.
And it's just like you're going, keep it up. Let's get to the, it was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wish I were in the audience.
Right. Yeah, and it probably would have been more. It was probably more fun for us as performers. So it would have been better if you were in the performing crowd. But we had people singing that weren't singers, and that kind of thing, because everybody wanted to participate.
Wow.
But that was really the highlight, I think, for me, of the whole 22 years or whatever we did.
Amazing. Wow. And what was your last MEMF like? How did that feel?
Well, we really wanted to have a final, since it looked like at that point we really didn't know what the future was going to hold.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to have one during school, because that would mean the faculty who had been involved could participate more easily and have more of the students. And so we ended up doing this sort of, it was based on travel, so it was different parts of it. It was like almost a survey of, people, and there were there were diaries of musicians traveling, so we had sections read from the diaries, and we took the trip across the channel and everybody threw up over the side, or whatever, and so that it had this sort of funny body elements, but was also very interesting, and so and then there were a lot of people from concert choir. I got to sing with a lot of my students who were there. There were former students who'd come back to sing as soloists. It was a real kind of happy ending, if that could be possible in that situation.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. And then we really, from about 2018 or so, we're looking for somebody to take over. Mm-hmm. And what we needed was someone who was trained and comfortable with this music, obviously, and energetic. And you show up, and I think energetic maybe is the first thing that comes to mind with you. And that's really what it takes. And that's why it took 3 of us to run it.
Wow.
Because there was just so much you had to do, so many details and all that stuff. And I think you'll probably find you'll want a partner at some point if you find the right person to do that with. But I think this is a great opportunity for you to take the next step, especially with your background and all the people you know.
Oh, thank you so much for your trust. I really appreciate it. And it is an absolute privilege for me. I, in fact, didn't know that I'll be sitting here even a year ago, actually.
Right? No, I remember when you came and played your audition recital or whatever that was. Yeah. That was great.
And I did not know that there is this whole situation with MEMF after your retirement and how the next person is being searched for.
Right.
I did not know that it was me.
Right. Well, we did. We had talked to Priscilla and Liza Malamud, who's now running Newberry, right, who had been a long-time MEMF person. And there were a few people we were sort of hoping, but they have these jobs that are in bigger cities, and it works out better for them to be where they are.
Right.
But you just seem like the perfect person to step in here.
It's amazing how life works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, it really does.
One day, Dan just mentioned, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I do know MEMF. I actually have been a student.
Right.
And I'm already preparing my speech to reopen MEMF, to basically have a big returning party. I don't want to call it revival because it has never been dead.
Right.
It was just on hiatus.
Right. Well, and I do think COVID provided that, as much as we didn't want it to stop, provided a way to sort of let it come down a little bit and not try to recreate it. So now we've had some space. So now it's time to bring it back in whatever form it ends up being.
Exactly. And that's so exciting to see what do our audiences actually want and how will they like. And so we get to experiment.
Right.
This time is just one weekend, not in the summer. We'll see if everyone will freeze to death.
No, not in Wisconsin.
Right? We're all prepared, and me being Siberian,
Right,
I
that
actually
helps.
love winter.
Right.
And I'm really excited because we get all these different workshops. So Sarah Braley, another very important member and
Right.
also Handel Aria Competition
Right.
director, is leading a community choir. And so everybody is welcome, just like you said, your magic experience in that Monteverde.
Right.
The same. Everyone can come and sing Bach chorales together and just have this experience of early music in their hearts, whether you know how to sing, whether you are on faculty, maybe teaching an instrument, or whether you're an actual singer.
Right.
Right? And then what I'm also so excited about is that a Baroque dancer from Sweden will be coming and teaching the dance students
Right.
the Baroque dance steps. Yet we give the freedom to those Baroque to those modern dancers to reinvent and to interpret that Baroque dance. And so we have students that applied who are body percussion majors or belly dance or break
Right.
dance.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to see how can they choreograph a Baroque piece based on Baroque dance moves and yet making it their own.
Right.
How that will look like. And
Yeah.
so I guess my motivation behind it is the question, how can we recontextualize the historical performance?
Sure.
So it is maybe, well, cool again.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And so our next generation can be attracted by it and
Yeah.
can be informed and maybe inspired to
Right.
learn a historic instrument.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, we always had dance classes because that was such a big part of the music. You know, anything pre-1800 is dance-based in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so we always did that. And I think that's a great way to continue it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking, how can we take what you've done, which is so precious and so valuable, one step further and one step closer to our students who are so young, and maybe something that has been around 300 years ago doesn't seem as actual to them, but I feel like it is. It's just this one little link that is missing for them to understand, oh yeah, this is cool. This is something I want to do.
Right.
And it actually enriches and enhances my experience of music in general, knowing the history of it, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And so many modern pieces are based on older pieces.
Exactly.
Right? Even through the 19th century, there's all of that reworking of material.
Exactly.
You know, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Right. And another really exciting guest is my fellow alumna from Juilliard. He is a composer, improviser, and harpsichordist. And what I'm really excited about is bringing very different groups of students like classical pianists who need the music that was written for them,
Right.
and jazz pianists who would prefer not to have any music to improvise.
Right. Yeah.
And composers. So three very different mindsets and very different musicians in one room to see how can you actually write a piece that maybe can seem like a Baroque piece, or maybe you can learn to improvise upon the bass, and yet you can be a nowadays performer who is informing himself from that experience.
Yep.
Right? And yes, you might also learn how to play the harpsichord.
Always a good thing.
Right,
Right.
right. Oh, this is so exciting. And then our weekend in January actually falls to 100 years anniversary of Schrödinger paper. And since my husband is a physicist and
Right.
also on faculty at UW, and also the reason how we actually are here now,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I always tell it is his fault, which I'm really, really grateful for. So we are connecting the physics with music, and it's going to be a program dedicated to cats because Schrödinger obviously
Right. That's the thing. Yeah.
is famous for the cat.
Right.
And this is exciting. It has been such a wonderful research for me. Scarlatti's Cat's Fugue, Carlo Farina,
Right.
Cat's Piece, Bieber. And so all of those pieces that have been kind of in the libraries hidden now come to the light
Yeah.
in connection to physics, where my husband will talk about different Baroque tunings, which not many people know about.
Well, I'm still surprised that people are shocked by the fact that the tuning wasn't really standardized until 1900 or around there. And that's one of the fun things about it, that people would tune their instruments wherever they were comfortable.
Yeah.
They didn't have to go to Paris to check on what the A was going to be, right? And even tuning systems, there was a lot of debate.
Exactly.
Do you want even tempering? Well, maybe not, Yeah, so I think that's a great thing to continue to revisit.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And also just the sound wave, like how that works. He has a whole construction that will come on stage
Right.
and will basically show the sound. And yes, and we made a great pun, which I'm very proud of. Very nerdy.
Okay.
So it's quants and physics. Because obviously as a flutist, I'm a little biased. I
Right,
love
yeah,
quants.
yeah, sure.
And it kind of sounds like quantum physics, which my husband is working on.
Right. That's good, though. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
like that. Yeah.
So that's the name of our lecture recital, where there will be cats, there will be quants, and there will be physics.
Perfect.
Celebrating the 100th Schrödinger paper
Right.
anniversary.
Yeah.
So, and
Well,
then
those kind of things that are almost serendipitous, right? That happens to fall during that
Right.
week when when it was the hall was available and all the things you have to schedule around.
exactly.
And I think that's what you want to pursue. That's always what you want to do, is look and see, oh, this is the time to look at this,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, this is so exciting. And then finally, maybe it's a fun fact to mention, it will all culminate in, well, we have 2 morning activities, which I feel like also mentioning.
Right.
We will have a guided tour in Chelcy Museum, where the visual art will be connected to music and dance. So
Right.
we'll have a solo musician, a solo dancer, and an art historian, basically remarrying those forms of arts. It's Saturday morning, and Sunday morning we'll have a family concert where every child gets to pet our instruments. It's the
Oh, good.
historical
Right.
Instruments petting zoo.
Petting zoo, that's great. Yeah.
And finally, every child will have a little passport to check the emotions, the seasons, and the animals they could recognize in the concert.
Oh, wow.
I'm really
Sounds
excited
like a great
for that.
idea. Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and
You should mention the dates, I think,
yes, of course,
since
January.
we're going to be promoting it this way.
Right. January 23rd to 25th, 2026. It's a weekend filled with joy, historical performance, dance, art, and music.
Right. And intellectual activity, it sounds like, too.
Exactly.
bring your
Lectures,
notepad.
workshops.
Yeah.
Yes. And finally, the student showcase, where on Sunday night we'll all culminate all of our beautiful lectures, workshops, and all the knowledge that they get to learn in a beautiful concert of dance, music, and just fun of kind of return of Madison Early Music Festival.
Right.
Yay!
great.
So exciting.
Yeah. So you want your hat now?
Yes, let's do the hat now.
So we did, through the years, have different kinds of paraphernalia. One year we decided to do hats, and I happen to have some. So I thought we'd crown you, so you're officially a MEMF person. There you go.
What an honor. Thank you.